Good afternoon, it's Michael Cook and Stephen Johnston here to join you for the latest segment of our webinar video series based on Equicapita's little book of What Next. Today we're going to share with you some of the highlights from Chapter 6, Valuing Your Business Normalization Adjustments. And a very short segment today, but we just kind of wanted to highlight for you some of the elements that are considered when you start with that high-level EBITDA and you start driving down to what the real cash flow of the business is. And Steve, maybe give a few examples of what we're often encountering when we look at the business.
Yeah, so the idea behind normalizations is really straightforward. Obviously, historically, you have been running your business and you had complete control over the cash flow and make decisions about whether to make certain payments that might be above or below market rates. And obviously, the acquirer of the business will want to operate on an arm's length full market basis. And so typically, or sort of two very common normalizations to the earnings are in the form of an adjustment to the rental rate, because it's very common for the vendor to also own the real estate, and sometimes they are charging what would be above the market rate for that building, and sometimes they are charging below the market rate. And so that normalization may go either way. There may be an adjustment in the calculation of the forward-looking cash flows to say that the rent might be lower or the rent might be higher. Another very common normalization is, of course, in the form of the historical compensation that the vendor was paying to the founder group, to himself or to other participants in the equity structure of the business, as a way to pay themselves. Well, clearly going forward, those types of bonuses or above market compensation for the positions that they were occupying won't exist in the business, and that would be an adjustment where the actual look forward cash flow would actually be higher than it was historically, because that had been a cost that wouldn't be present in the business going forward. And so when you hear private equity purchasers talk about normalizations, it's not a sinister thing where they're trying to say that we're trying to reduce or somehow diminish what we think is a sustainable cash flow. What they're really trying to do is to say, on an arm's length basis going forward, what would be the appropriate levels for all these type of different costs, and let's arrive at what really is the sort of market rate, the cash flow based on market rates for these different components. We really do want to emphasize that can often be in your favor. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the favor of the purchaser, but it's just to arrive at a more accurate number.
And in fact, it most often is in the favor of the business owner.
Yeah.
And really the essence of the normalization of the management compensation, as an example, if you pay yourself $1 million to, in the service of the business and the role that you engage in, if you have to hire someone else to do that role and you're down, in Palm Springs for 8 months a year, and you have to pay that person $200,000 a year, that difference between the $1 million and the $200,000 is effectively an add back to your cash flow to increase your cash flow stream. And it's really the essence of how much would you have to pay someone to do your job if you weren't there. And that's what we would look for as we go forward owning the business.
Yeah, and as we said, the two that we just mentioned, as Mike says, are most often in the favor of the vendor.
Yeah. And so, as Stephen had mentioned, very high level normalizations, looking at what the cash flow would look like on a go-forward basis after that ownership transition takes place. So thank you for joining us today for our segment on normalization adjustments, and we look forward to you joining us for the next video segment of Equicapita's little book of What Next.